So welcome everyone to the July forecast. It's going to be an interesting month, I think. I have observed in the astrology at least. It's a very interesting month astrologically, and it shouldn't be any other way in real life, in quote unquote real life. I probably live my life more in the stars anyway, that when things happen, it's like, oh yeah, okay, well, that's just the way it's expressing itself. But one of the things that's happening in July, it's a very interesting configuration that we haven't seen in, oh, I don't know, it's like been thousands of years, is an exact conjunction between Mars, Rahu, and Uranus. And I'm going to talk about that. And I'm going to talk about it in the sign Aries. And this is sidereal Aries, of course. If you follow me, you'll be aware that I use sidereal signs. And so this is all about new beginnings. And one of the things I thought about this was because Rahu and Uranus both are similar. Rahu rules Aquarius in traditional Indian astrology, and Uranus rules it in modern day astrology. So what Aquarius is all about is progress, and Mars coming together in Aries with these two is going to really progress things a lot this month, a lot. Now that can be in many, many different ways, but historically, or even more recently, let's just say more recently, there's been a lot of new inventions. There's been a lot of new tech advancements when they've come together. But historically, thousands of years ago, like Alexander the Great was born under this configuration. So it definitely has a tie-in with the Russia story for sure as well. And so there's that other side of it where, yes, on the one hand, it's progress and tech advancement and all of that, but it's also very Mars-like. It's Aries and Mars, it's warlike. And so it could also progress things in that way, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I mean, you know, you can look at it maybe in another way, that things progress, like it seems to be obviously escalating in terms of fatalities and bombings and taking over a new city as I speak in Ukraine, for example. But it could be in other ways that, you know, it progresses. That is that it could be more beneficial. However, I do think that the long-term impact of what's going to happen in July is not what we would hope for. Let me put it that way. I do think that this is probably going to start things that will lead to, and eventually lead to, major conflict around the world, not just between Russia and Ukraine. And we're seeing it already anyway. I'll talk more about, you know, all the configurations that I think leads to that. But yeah, so that there's two sides to it, is what I'm saying. Two sides to it. So the tech stuff for sure, new beginnings there, new developments, absolutely. Women's health is another one that I want to talk about, because of course Mars is now transiting Aries, where the eclipse occurred in April, and the April eclipse occurred in the lunar mansion called Barony, meaning she who bears, literally symbolized by a yoni or the vulva. And so it's the three stars that point downward like a downward facing triangle, and it's all about birth. It's all about birth, but it's ruled by the god of death, so it's all about life and death. And so the abortion issue is going to really, really get quite volatile in July because of Mars's transit over the eclipse degree. Now, one of the other things that is leading to, I think, as well, is, or one of the kind of other things that's happening alongside that, I should say, is the travel problems at the moment, and the travel industry in general, and the tourism industry, because Venus is quite afflicted at this time, despite the fact that it's in its own sign, Taurus. It is aspected by Rahu, and Ketu, the south node, is in Libra, Venus's other sign, and Saturn is about to step back into Capricorn and aspect Libra also. And so what we're seeing, of course, is the restrictions. Restrictions as in it's just not that easy to travel these days because you either your flight's canceled or whatever. And so that's a whole other thing. I'll talk more about that and when I talk about Saturn returning to Capricorn and a return to some level of restriction. And this is something I was predicting, at the beginning of the year, and I wasn't really happy about predicting that, but it seems to be the case now. Now, whether that's also restriction in terms of because of more of the virus, another wave, I don't know, or is it just a restriction in terms of the fuel prices and the energy issues and the strikes that are going on. And then the final thing I'll talk about before I talk about the lunations, the new moon and the full moon in July, is Jupiter, which is about to retrograde also in Pisces. And so that could also point to the possibility of a reversal of a recent law. Or if not very recently, the law in America on abortion. It could be some other law or policy somewhere in the world. But personally, of course, for us individually, it's about reconnecting to what we find meaningful. So let's go through this one by one after we chant for Ganesh to help us remove any obstacles, to help clear the mind. And I'll chant this 3 times. Om Ganganapataye Namah. Om Ganganapataye Namah. Om Ganganapataye Namah. So just a reminder again that I use the Sidereal, and this notion of one person's utopia is another person's dystopia. Whatever transits I'm talking about now, there are always 2 sides to it. And I'm always trying to like skirt, or kind of try and walk the fine line between, I suppose, doom and gloom predictions and being like overly optimistic and sugarcoating things. But of course, each individual will experience all of these in their own unique way. And so there's many opportunities in a way at this time, because despite the volatility in the world, all of the visible planets right now are in their own signs sidereally. So there's so many strengths available right now. But again, I would say, one person's utopia, that's all looking great and everything, but that could be someone else's dystopia, because when planets, sometimes when they're very strong for impact, especially what we term the more malefic or cruel planets like Mars that I mentioned. And again, Mars being the planet of war. So it really depends, in other words, where you're at, your circumstances, also your cycles, the dashas, we call them in Indian astrology, your birth chart, your unique chart, and where you live. Now, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe. That will really help on the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get more hits on the YouTube channel to get these videos out there more. If you're listening to this live, if you're here live, of course, you already are a patron, so you'd be all up on all of this. But if you haven't, consider joining as a patron, and you'll get a 27-page timeline of your life, which will include your planetary cycles, your birth chart, and how to read that. For those patrons who haven't got their timeline, and I'm hoping most of you have, you can contact me, email me, or message me on the Patreon platform, and I'll be happy to send that on to you. I just need your time, date, and place of birth. And then also you get monthly reports like these, but more sign-based reports where I talk about each sign, how they're impacted. And then also the Scorpio Video Club, I call it, where I do like maybe some controversial topics that I wouldn't like to release publicly, and also just sharing some of the secrets of Indian astrology. So the first thing to talk about, of course, is the Mars in Aries. So its conjunction with Uranus and Rahu itself is not really that rare, except for that they're coming together by the exact same degree. So it's quite rare that they are all coming together, but it's absolutely rare that it's the same degree. And again, it's been thousands of years since this happened. So, every time you see Uranus and Rahu come together, that's going to be like some advancement or other. every time Mars and Rahu comes together, there's going to be some disturbances, but also some progress or other. Likewise, Mars and Uranus. But now it's all three of them. So, I mean, one of the examples I picked out was this thing at CERN in a few days where they're going to set off this collider, which is going to be interesting. I don't know how that's going to play out, but basically they're attempting to crash these particles together at such speeds that they create new energy or open up some sort of new, I don't know, it's kind of mind-boggling what they're doing. But it'll be interesting to see the results. Now, is this the thing that is pushing things forward? Possibly. Or is it some other tech advancement that comes out right now, like in July? Also possible. And considering that in the past, when we've seen this kind of configuration and the advancement with the iPhone and the Apple computer and all of these things, I would actually suggest if there is some tech released in July or around this time, it might be worth thinking about getting on board with it, because it might be something that really develops in a big way. Now, whether that is financially or not, I don't know, because the markets are going to be so volatile, I imagine, in this next period that you'd really want to have your wits about you in the stock markets and all of that. So that's a whole other. If anyone has any questions about that are here live, or again, leave a comment if you want to ask me about that. I've written an article about the markets and the possibility of a stock market crash, which I don't know if it's going to be a stock market crash in July, because I haven't seen that historically when Mars and Ra have come together. It might be a temporary spike actually in many ways, but it's definitely an adjustment. But I have seen a stock market crash possible next year. And so if you read that article, again, that's for patrons only. Sorry to make this whole thing about, oh, patrons only, but at the end of the day, I'm putting stuff out there a lot, and I have to kind of think about people who support me and who follow me and financially who support me as well, and to give them something extra always. So anyway, that's a whole other. So Mars is going to transit the eclipses, the degrees that have been set off already, or whether they're actually eclipse degrees that have been set off or about to be, based on upcoming eclipses even. So a planet can transit an eclipse degree before the actual eclipse or after, and it'll trigger it. So Mars is going to transit 7 degrees of Aries on July 7th, which is opposite the October eclipse in Libra. Then it's going to transit 16 degrees on the 20th of July, which is conjunct the April eclipse just gone. This is really the key one in terms of the abortion law. This is when it's going to get really set off in a big way. And then at the end of July, July 28th, it's going to hit 21 degrees, which is opposite the November 8th eclipse in Libra. Now the October eclipse is a solar eclipse, and the November is a total lunar eclipse, which is going to be a very interesting time itself. But now Mars is going to activate that in July. And of course, November 8th is in the US, the midterms. And so Mars is going to trigger something by the end of July in the US around that. Anyway, that's a whole other side. But it's going to be very interesting to see how all of this develops, whether it's, again, more tech development or war development or energy development. Like, I don't even know what's going to happen with this CERN thing, but it's going to be fascinating to watch it unfold. A reminder of the eclipse degrees here. So 16 degrees Aries, that was on the 30th of April in this barony. Again, literally meaning she who bears. It's all about childbirth. May 16th, then after that, we had one in Vishaka, which was at 1 degree of Scorpio. So that means Mars will transit opposite in August. So I'll talk more about that in August and trigger that one in August as well. And then this is the one in October, the solar eclipse on 25th of October at 7 degrees of Libra, where the sun is almost exactly debilitated by degree at its weakest point. So this is a trigger also in July with Mars opposite. And then finally, we have this one on the 8th of November at 21 degrees of Aries, and again, barony. So is it that the abortion issue is going to be a huge issue in terms of the midterms? Likely, very likely. And we're going to see it from this month, probably. Okay, so the nodes themselves, which are now really settled into Aries and Libra, have really, I guess, so far, and they've only just started in these signs, but they've so far really proved that, you know, they really do increase the extremes between Aries and Libra. And historically, we can look back at all of the times they've been here, and there's been major upsets in the world. It means that Rahu is increasing Mars type themes like war, and decreasing Venus type themes like luxury and even the basics, really, but especially luxury. And I think we're going to see even more of that once Saturn returns to Capricorn and aspects Libra, where Ketu is now. And yeah, I mean, we're just looking at more of a squeeze, more of a pinch. Now, another thing that's happening at the moment is that Rahu and Ketu are in, though in Aries and Libra, we divide each sign up 9 times with 3 degrees, 20 minutes each section. And each one of those sections correlates to a sign in the 9th divisional chart, which is an underlying support or strength to the birth chart or to any given chart right now. And there isn't that underlying support right now. This is another reason why we're having a real difficulty right now in terms of the economy, in terms of famine, in terms of supply chains and resources, and, you know, people trying to get on holiday, all of those things. Is because Rahu is in Scorpio in that 9th division in Aries, and Ketu, more especially, is in Taurus division of Libra. Now, why is that a problem? Well, Ketu is debilitated in Taurus, likewise Rahu in Scorpio. So what you see is Ketu reducing Taurus type things now on underneath it all. It's already reducing Libra type things, right? Now it's also reducing Taurus type things, and that's the basics, the very basics. Like when we're seeing, like, you know, grain trying to be shipped out of Ukraine and all of this kind of issue, this is Ketu causing a problem in Taurus. And then at the same time, Rahu opposite in Scorpio is exaggerating doom and gloom predictions. So I am also very cognizant of that I'm trying not to make very many predictions right now when I look at the world the way it is, because that's what Rahu and Scorpio does. It's that underlying sense that there is some real doom and gloom, a sense of, you know, anyway, that's Rahu and Ketu in Scorpio and Taurus. Saturn now is going to re-enter Capricorn by mid-July. And so I looked at this last year and I thought, okay, well, we're really not done with the virus, I guess. And by the autumn winter of 2023, we're going to have to go back to some sort of restriction we thought we were done with, because that's what it means to say that Saturn moves out of a sign and then goes back into it. We're not done. We have to go back to what we were doing and finish it. And I don't know if that means actually further restriction because of the virus. I'm already seeing in some places that there are spikes in cases, and that they're now already talking about the possibility of having to wear masks in public again. I don't know if that's going to be the case, or if indeed it's just a case of restrictions because of the economy, which is more obviously the case, like, you know, putting fuel in your car and you can't go as far or something. Things like that. But there are restrictions coming back to some degree or another because of Saturn's return to Capricorn, and especially because of its aspect to Libra, which is certainly a more restriction on social life, again, for whatever reason. And what's really interesting is it's doing it all within this lunar mansion called Dhanishta. And Dhanishta is all about all of the resources, that all of the elements that come together, all the alliances that come together as well to make something happen. And so we're seeing Saturn retrograde in this lunar mansion, and we're seeing this, I guess, further solidifying of the NATO alliances, and also other countries now joining as well, because the last time Saturn was in Dhanishta nearly 30 years ago, that was the formation of the EU. And so we're seeing this kind of reformation in a way, as Saturn, the planet of form, goes retrograde, reform. So that's spelling it out. Anyway, that's Saturn in Capricorn. Then at the end of the month, Jupiter goes retrograde in Pisces from June 28th until November. And this is again like when we're reconnecting personally to what inspires us, what gives our life meaning and purpose. Maybe reconnecting with something that we used to find purposeful and meaningful, reconnecting with someone, maybe also. Whatever the sign Pisces is in your own chart, of course, by house position, that will be where that's more apparent. But generally, Jupiter represents, again, it's the economy, its expansion, its growth, and it's going to retrograde. And then it's also being aspected by Saturn, which is moving back into Capricorn. This, for me, suggests recession is beginning, because on the other hand, Jupiter in Pisces conjunct Neptune has shown the inflation. And like, I think most astrologers would have predicted that for this year, as well as floods. So floods and inflation, everything, this increase in not such good ways always. There's increase in some good ways, but sometimes not so good ways. At the same time, Rahu has been on one side and Saturn on the other side of this Jupiter in Pisces and squeezing it even further. So in other words, it's almost like squeezing inflationary trends upward. Now that Saturn's going back into Capricorn, it takes that squeeze off in a way, but it also aspects Pisces now with the third house aspect. I'll show you that in the chart now when we look at the new moons and the new and full moon. So basically, it just suggests that to get this inflation in check, it's going to have to be a recession. And that seems to be what recessions are all about anyway. So this could be the beginning of the recessionary cycle. So then looking at the lunations, the full moon is on the 13th of July. This is when Saturn returns to Capricorn. And the new moon at the end of the month on the 28th of July. So let's look at these two now. So the full moon is in Uttarashada, the latter victorious one. It's the lunar mansion that bridges Sagittarius and Capricorn. And it is also called Guru Purnima. So Guru is the teacher, the guide. Purnima just literally means full moon. So this is the full moon to honor the teachers, the tradition that we come from, and those people who teach, who guide us. So this is the chart. It's at the very end of Sagittarius, which is the beginning of this lunar mansion, Uttara Ashada, the latter auspicious or the latter victorious one. It is a more auspicious lunar mansion because it's a more stable, fixed one. The Uttara ladder ones are always more fixed and stable. And it's that kind of seeing something through. It's like sticking to a plan and sticking to your guns and just, getting on with it. That's the theme of this lunar mansion. It's all about austerities as well, which is another key thing for this full moon. But again, it's about connecting to our teachers as well. You can see that it's in the sign Sagittarius, which is the teacher, the guru, and itself Jupiter, which is called Guru in Sanskrit, is, again, remember, beginning to retrograde by the end of the month. So this full moon, I think, and leading to the Jupiter retrograde by the end of July, I think is an important time for reconnecting to maybe a teacher, maybe a teachings, tradition, or connecting to your own, again, maybe your own sense of what gives you purpose and meaning and your guiding principles. So that's the full moon. You can see Saturn has just re-entered Capricorn, joining Pluto. Again, we might be looking at further restrictions. Its aspect onto Jupiter now is further restrictions economically. But the good news about that is that hopefully it will keep the inflation in check. Will start to bring it down. And because Jupiter is retrograde also, you can see here Mars, Rahu, and Uranus are all getting closer and closer. Rahu and Uranus are almost at the same degree now. Venus has just moved into Gemini. It's in Taurus for the first couple of weeks of July, moves into Gemini. So it gets away from Rahu. That's one thing. It's joining Mercury and the Sun here. Ketu is still in Libra, so that's another thing. But I think there could be some adjustments here by mid-month for sure. And then at the end of the month, we have the new moon in Pushya, which is entirely within the sign Cancer on the 28th of July. This is when Jupiter stations retrograde and aspects this new moon. Now, the other thing is that Mars, Rahu, and Uranus now join up by the exact same degree around this time, and Mars aspects the moon as well. So you have Mars aspecting this moon, Jupiter aspecting this moon, and Saturn opposite this moon. So there's a mixed bag here for this new lunar month from the end of July. Jupiter, you could say, yeah, it's more auspicious, and it is an auspicious lunar mansion here, Pushya. But Saturn opposite is again this theme that we're going back to here, and it might be a bit, oh no, back to this kind of again restriction again. And then Mars is aspecting by fourth house while it conjoins Rahu and Uranus, and that could create a lot of volatility. And its aspect onto the moon and the new moon and lunar month coming up could, be very reactive. And I would be very mindful by the end of July and this new moon of being very reactive while these three come together in a very explosive, very reactive state. It's almost like I'm thinking about that thing in CERN where it's like you just don't know what's going to happen. They plan it as much as they can, but it's very unpredictable when they set something off like that. So think about your own life as well and what might be set off, and try not to be as reactionary. Try and be more proactive, get on top of it. I would say use the energy for its purposes, which is to break through something, to overcome some challenge, and to strengthen yourself and find some new beginning. If you try and sit on it, it might eat away at you. It might build to a kind of point where it just explodes at some point. So maybe not do that. And try and find some outlet, I would say. So that's all month really, but really especially leading up to this new moon when Mars, Rahu, Uranus all come together. So that's the new moon at the end of the month. Before I finish up and take any questions, I'm going to just highlight something here. I want to just remind people who write, those astrologers who might be watching this, the next issue of Timeline Astrology will be out next year. This is the 5th edition. I can't believe it's the 5th year I'm doing this. So I just do one a year because it's quite a lot of work. So I only do one, and I want it to be a good quality magazine when I do it as well. And thus far, it's been like amazing to really get some amazing articles from astrologers from around the world. So this is a last call for submissions, really, because the deadline is 1st of September. So you've got July, August to send something. Even if it's just a query, I'm happy to accept queries at this point, which means just like an idea or an outline or a rough sketch of an article that you would like to write. So the theme is dashas, cycles of Indian astrology, whether planetary or sign-based dashas. So it's all about what got me hooked on astrology right from the beginning. Are these dashas, and seeing how our lives are mapped out in these cycles that are just absolutely mind-boggling, and at the same time just so perfect in how everything evolves in just perfect formations. Really, every experience in our life, every thought, every feeling even is mapped out in cycles, and how we are just all part of the one, and the one expanding, ever increasing in just such perfection. So I'm really excited about this particular issue because it's really the one thing of Indian astrology that really, like I said, is the first thing that got me hooked when I had my chart done over like 20 years ago now. So anyway, you can get in touch, and here's the link. I'll just show you the website. So this is a call for submissions with a bit more detail if you want to look at what I'm looking for. And some of the finer print down here as well. And if you were to like submit data, there's a certain way you have to do that in terms of birth data and all of that, and just a little bit more as well about the format and wording and so on, because it is a digital magazine. It's a digital magazine primarily, although I do print copies for patrons, which is again another shout out to become a patron. but otherwise it's a digital print. So it's actually smaller articles are fine as well, shorter articles. So you can go to my website there. And so that's it. For those that are here live, I'll take questions now. For everyone else, wishing you all the very best for the month ahead. And until next time.